Imagine a young Roman peasant leaving his small village for the first time. He carries only the basics, a change of clothes, some dry bread, and a serious, determined look. When he arrives at the military training center, he has no idea that he will be molded like a red-hot iron. Because the Roman army was not just a group of soldiers, it was a school of discipline, a war machine built from the ground up, where each man was prepared to withstand the impossible. From the earliest days of the Republic, Rome understood that war was not won by courage alone, but by preparation. Roman soldiers, called legionaries, underwent training so severe that it would make any other warrior of the time look like an amateur. Forced marches of more than 30 kilometers with a full load. Exercises with wooden swords twice as heavy as real ones, forging muscles and technique at the same time. They trained in hand-to-hand combat, shield formation, advance and retreat strategies, as if every detail could decide the outcome of a battle. And it could. But it wasn't just physical. The mind was also trained. The Romans learned to obey orders automatically, almost instinctively, as if their lives depended on the precision of each movement. And it did. The training also included notions of military engineering, construction of fortified camps, bridges, roads, siege engines. It is no exaggeration to say that a legionary was at the same time a warrior, an engineer, and a strategist. While other empires based their forces on temporary conscripts or nobles who fought for personal glory, Rome forged professionals. Ordinary men who became experts in war, molded by years of constant training. They served for up to 25 years, which created a legion of experienced veterans capable of facing any scenario, be it in the icy mountains of Germania or the scorching deserts of Syria. This level of preparation was unmatched, and it was expensive. For this reason, few empires managed to replicate this model. It took more than willpower. It took time, structure, resources, and above all, a military culture that placed the collective above the individual. Rome understood this early on. That's why its legions weren't just strong, they were nearly indestructible. Now this same veteran legionary, already with wrinkles on his face and scars on his arms, is leading a group of recruits onto the battlefield. He does not shout random orders. His movements are calm, almost automatic. He knows exactly where each man should be, when they should advance, retreat, form a line, or change formation. Because the secret of the legion was not just the strength of its soldiers. It was the almost mathematical order in which they moved. This finely tuned internal organization was what transformed the Roman legions into an instrument of war that was impossible to replicate. The legions were not merely platoons loosely packed into the field. They were divided into smaller units, cohorts, centuries, and even groups of 8 men called contubernia. Each had clear functions, well-defined chains of command, and specific training. This meant that even if one commander died, another could immediately take over with no loss of effectiveness. Every cog in the machine was replaceable, but the machine continued to function with the same perfection. This decentralized yet synchronized structure gave the legion lethal flexibility on the battlefield. And the most brilliant thing about it was that this organization was not rigid. The legion could adapt. Formations such as the famous testudo, turtle shield formation, triple line, triplex aces, or dynamic reorganization during prolonged combats were applied fluidly. Each soldier knew exactly what role his unit played and trained constantly with the same men, which created a cohesion and mutual trust rarely seen in contemporary armies. Meanwhile, enemies had difficulty even maintaining cohesion between tribes or mercenaries hired in a hurry. There was no standardization or clear hierarchy. In Rome, on the other hand, the commander knew he could trust the structure of the legion, from the general to the last man in the last row. This internal harmony made the legion function like a living body, where each part knew its role and reacted with almost choreographed precision to the chaos of war. It was like watching a clock tick while all the other armies were hitting stones. This organization not only increased the legion's effectiveness, but also confused its enemies, who did not know how to break through such a well-organized structure. And it was precisely this organizational engineering that helped Rome conquer. and maintain an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. The logistics of the Roman army were not just a support. They were the true engine that kept the war machine running even in the most adverse conditions. Imagine a force of tens of thousands of soldiers marching for months, crossing mountains, forests, and deserts, facing extreme climates and hostile territories. No other army of the time could sustain such a large-scale operation with the same efficiency as the Romans. Rome invested heavily in the construction of a colossal network of roads, the famous Roman roads, that were used not only for trade, but above all for the rapid and safe movement of troops. These paved roads connected every corner of the empire, facilitating the transport of supplies, weapons, and reinforcements with a speed and regularity that left enemies completely unprepared. It was as if the army had a first-rate military road system, ensuring that no soldier was left without food, water, or ammunition. In addition, Roman logistics involved a complex chain of strategic depots, stores of supplies, horses, equipment, and food positioned along the march routes. This allowed the legions to always be supplied, even in territories far from Italy, without having to rely exclusively on what they could plunder. Meanwhile, other armies, which ventured into long campaigns, ended up trapped by a lack of supplies, forced to retreat or face defeat due to scarcity. Another vital point was the construction of fortified camps each night, which gave the soldiers security and kept the army's organization intact. These camps were not improvised. They were planned and built with precision to withstand surprise attacks and to be safe points of rest and regrouping. The efficiency of Roman logistics not only allowed the continuity of military campaigns, but also provided a psychological advantage against their enemies. They knew that they were facing an adversary who could simply restock indefinitely, while their own forces were rapidly wearing out. This ability to plan, build, and maintain a superior logistical network was a gigantic differential and impossible to be successfully copied by other armies, especially because it required financial resources, specialized labor, and a highly effective centralized administration, something that many empires and armies did not even have. The Roman legion's capacity for innovation and adaptation was perhaps the most valuable secret that allowed them to maintain their supremacy over the centuries. While other armies clung to traditional tactics and resisted change, the Romans stood out for their constant openness to learning from their mistakes and incorporating new strategies, weapons, and technologies. Think of the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, during the Second Punic War. The Roman army suffered a crushing defeat against Hannibal, who used a double encirclement tactic to destroy almost the entire Roman force. It was a historic humiliation, a shock that could have ended Roman expansion. But it did not. Instead of persisting in the same strategies that had failed, the Romans did the opposite. They studied the defeat, understood its flaws, and transformed their way of fighting. They reorganized the legions, changed formations, adopted new weapons, and even reinvented the way they trained their soldiers. The defeat was a turning point for growth and innovation. Furthermore, the Romans were masters at adapting their tactics to different battle conditions and terrain. An army that could fight effectively in open terrain, as well as in dense forests, mountains, or even fortified cities, had an almost insurmountable advantage. They developed flexible formations that could expand or contract, flanking maneuvers and surprise attacks, and integrated the use of siege engines and military engineering to break through even the most difficult defenses. This innovative spirit was not limited to the battlefield. It was also reflected in troop management, recruitment, infrastructure construction, and political strategy. The Roman army was not static. It was a dynamic force, reinventing itself to stay ahead of its enemies, no matter how advanced they were. It is this tireless capacity for adaptation and learning that makes the Roman military model so unique and difficult to copy. Armies that remained rigid, stuck in their traditions, always ended up falling behind as Rome advanced. The superior logistics of the Roman legions was the backbone of Rome's military might. While many ancient armies faced the monumental challenge of keeping their troops supplied during long campaigns, the Romans created a logistics system so efficient that it seemed almost like a perfect machine. Not only could they conquer vast territories, but they could sustain their troops there for years, which made all the difference between victory and defeat. Rome invested heavily in infrastructure. The famous Roman roads were built not just for trade, but to ensure the rapid movement of troops and supplies throughout the empire. Imagine hundreds of thousands of soldiers marching across unfamiliar terrain, crossing mountains, rivers, and deserts. These roads, bridges, and outposts allowed the army to move with speed and safety, something that other armies of the time could never replicate. In addition, the Romans were experts at setting up strategic depots along military routes. This meant that even on long campaigns and in hostile regions, soldiers never ran out of food, weapons, or equipment. It was a meticulously planned supply system that took into account local resources and weather conditions to ensure the survival of the troops. Another crucial point of this logistics was the ability to make the most of the resources of the conquered lands, ensuring that nothing was wasted. This efficiency allowed the Roman army to recover quickly from losses or difficult battles, always with new supplies and reinforcements ready to go into action. No other army managed to maintain such a robust and efficient system, because in addition to resources, detailed planning and strict discipline were required to carry out these large-scale operations. This mastery of logistics was what kept the legions not only alive, but always ready for the next confrontation, ensuring that Rome lasted centuries as a military power. The morale and collective identity of the Roman legions were the invisible force that sustained the army even in the most difficult moments, functioning as a fuel that drove soldiers to overcome challenges that seemed impossible. The Roman legion was not just a group of individuals fighting side by side. It was a cohesive unit, forged by a deep sense of belonging and pride in representing Rome, its values, and its destiny. This team spirit was built from training, where the soldier not only learned tactics in combat, but internalized the importance of his mission and the responsibility he had towards his comrades. Each legionist knew that his life depended on the precise action of each other member, creating an almost familial bond between them. This connection created an environment of trust and loyalty that was maintained even in desperate situations. When we talk about battles like the Teutoburg, in which 3 legions were practically annihilated, we clearly see the power of this collective morale. Despite the crushing defeat, Rome did not fall apart. It did not lose heart. Instead, they learned from their mistakes, restructured their forces, renewed their commitments, and set out to retaliate with even greater determination. The ability to bounce back after a disaster, without losing faith in their army and their mission, was a trait that other armies simply could not replicate. This unwavering morale, combined with a strong sense of Roman identity, that they were guardians of a unique civilization destined to dominate, gave the legionaries a drive that went beyond fear of death or the pursuit of individual glory. They fought for something greater, for the survival and perpetuation of Rome. Ultimately, this collective mindset even influenced the way the army functioned on a day-to-day basis, with rituals, rigorous discipline, and a code of honor that constantly reinforced cohesion and determination. This collective spirit made the Roman legions not just a military force, but an institution capable of surviving centuries of war, defeat, and political upheaval. You are about to discover a secret that few know, but that completely changed the history of warfare. Why no army has ever been able to copy the legendary Roman legions. This is the kind of knowledge that will open your mind to strategies and tactics that dominated the ancient world for centuries. If you want to understand what really made the Romans so unbeatable and how these teachings can change the way you see battles, campaigns, and even leadership, then don't waste any more time. Click now, watch until the end, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all the exclusive news. Get ready to dive headfirst into the military secrets that made Rome dominate the world. You won't want to miss this one. See you in the next video.